Okay, welcome to Faith and Count. This is class number 170 for those who are keeping count. And I think we have a good class tonight. I think it's good. I like it. So, of course, we're in Elul, and one of the things during Elul, Sephardim, they start Slichas at the very beginning of Elul. We will start at the end of Elul, but I thought I would. I think I would always already start getting into the mood and the passion and the excitement of Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur and the high holidays by starting to talk about that because there's just so much material to talk about. So one of the things that we say over and over again, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and all the 10 days of Tshuva, and even during, the 10 days of Tshuva, is Avinu Malkeinu. Now, Avinu Malkeinu, it sounds, at least the way I grew up, scary. Avinu Malkeinu, it's Ein Lanu Melech Elata. So when you start learning Chassidus, you start learning, connecting to the deeper aspect of what it's about, you begin to see the specialness and the romance and the beauty of the idea. So what is Avinu Malkeinu? What are we saying when we say Avinu Malkeinu? We're basically saying that who is our king? What is our king? Meaning, what rules our life in the psychological sense? Who's in charge? Many things seem to drive me and what goes on in my life. I get worried about my worries drive me. I worry about what's going to be the next day. I'm worried I'm going to get everything done. I'm worried that I'm not going to disappoint anybody by getting combined. I worry about what other people think about me. I worry about various medical issues. I worry about that. Then becomes your king. That's what it means, Avinu Malkeinu. Who is your king? Who drives you? What controls your life? And we're saying with Avinu Malkeinu is there's no other king other than Hashem. He's in charge of my life, and he definitely wants me to succeed. There's no other ruler. There's no other force in the world. There's nothing else that decides what's going to happen to me other than God. And God is the one who created me. He put me here in this world, and he has a mission for me, and he wants me to succeed. And it's just up to me to finally align myself to what that task is and what I'm supposed to do. That's what we're saying when we say Avinu Malkeinu. It's a different Avinu Malkeinu. It's an Avinu Malkeinu saying, you know what, I got to get rid of some of this baggage and these thoughts and these ideas that actually hold me down and make me think in a small way, in a confined way, in a restricted way. So some stories along these lines then. So there was another thing. So I'll start it this way. There is another thing that we do when we start out Slichas. If you read the very first line that we say in Slichas every single day, it starts out, Lacha Hashem Azdaka. To you, Hashem is true, justice, righteousness. You are, in other words, God is correct. V'anu boshus apanim, and we are embarrassed. Which basically, if you don't have any other understanding of it, it sounds like, yeah, God is right. We're in trouble. We should be embarrassed. We should be ashamed. And because we've made a lot of mistakes in the past year, and he knows what they were, and we're pretty embarrassed about it. That is one way to approach the high holiday season. However, the pasuk, the line that we're quoting there, comes from the prophet Daniel. And many of the things in Slichas come from Daniel, the prophet Daniel. And the rabbis tell us that what is being the story that actually is there is a different story. The story is that what happened at that time, that line comes from a story that when, Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, but this is also a story that's there, that there were three Jewish young men who had been captured and brought as slaves to Babylon. Their names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And at a particular point in time, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel, had built a statue of himself and had everybody bow down to that statue. And all the Jews did it except for these three guys. And for that, they were thrown into a fiery pit. Yeah, fiery pit. And they escaped miraculously. God did a miracle for them, and they weren't burned up, just like Abraham Avinu was thrown in the fire of Ur Kasdim. When they came out, the non-Jews in Babylon looked at the Jews, and they said to the Jews this very line, why are you bowing down to Nebuchadnezzar? It's a wicked person. He thinks of himself as a god. He's an idiot. He thinks that somehow by making statues and forcing everybody is going to make him more powerful, like, shutting down the press, whatever. He's just like, he thinks he can somehow rule over everybody and so forth. And they said the term is that they spit on, I don't know, spit at them, spit in front of them, the Jews. They say, look at these three guys. Look, realize what kind of a God you Jews have. And you have no reason to bow down, to give control and power to such a person. And that's what the Jews are saying. Hashem tzedakah, you are right, Hashem, and we are ashamed. We're ashamed. Why? We're ashamed because we don't realize that we are a piece of God, and we're a piece of godliness, and that we don't realize who the God who is in control of our life is. We don't understand that we have an Avinu Malkeinu, and we have no other God other than God, meaning that there's a part in us who is godliness, and it can never be suppressed, and it can never be extinguished, and it can never be fearful, and it can never be in trauma, and it can never be worried, and it can never be because it's God. And if we were aligned to that true part of the truest part of who we were, we would never feel fear, or we would always feel calm. We'd always feel in control because we were aligned to what truth is. And the truth is, Ein Anu Melech Eta. We have no other God other than you, meaning there's nothing else than you. The Kotzker Rebbe said it in a cute way, in a very short way. He said the following. He said, it says you should not have Elohim Zar. You should never have a stranger God for yourself. Don't take a strange God for yourself. That's the literal meaning, but he translated it in the same way you can translate the Hebrew, is you shouldn't make God a stranger. The God that's inside of you should not be a stranger. You should be able to talk to God, and you should be able to say who you are and who I am, and realize that, this is my God, and I am part of that, and I'm part of this mission. To illustrate this in story form, so let's go first with one story from. It's a story from a rabbi who was the chief rabbi of Antwerp, Belgium, and his name was Rabbi Chaim Kreitzworth. Rabbi Chaim Kreitzworth was born in 1920, before World War II, and he was in the yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, the scholars of Lublin. And he was known as a genius, and he was able to memorize tremendous amounts of text. Anyway, it came World War II, and he escaped. He got to Israel and later to the United States, and then later came back and became the chief rabbi in Holland. However, before the war, right at the beginning of the war, an older man came over to him and said, "You know what? I don't think I'm going to be able to survive the war. They're already doing the transports. They're already collecting the Jews. I know I'm going to be picked up and taken by them and so forth. And I have a lot of money, and I've been putting it away in a bank in Switzerland. And I have the secret code, the name for that bank. That's how you did it back in those days. You had a secret, in the bank account. It was a secret bank account in Switzerland." He says, "I want you to memorize the instructions of how to get the money. And in case after the war you come across any of my relatives, then you should tell them about this and give them their inheritance." The war came, as I said. Christ was escaped, but he came back to Europe, and years passed by. But he had a great memory. He never forgot this whole story and the codes and so forth. And one day, like 20, 25 years later, he was in shul and he happened to see a schnorrer, a meshulach, somebody who has a PhD in fund collecting from Harvard. And the guy was very raggedly dressed. And the guy, and he was asking for money. So Rabbi Kreisman gave him some money. And he asked, "What's your name?" And he said his name, and it rang a bell. And they started asking him, where were you born? What was your father? Who was this? And it began to stick together with the story, but he wasn't so quick. He wanted to do his research. He did his research. He kept talking to him day by day. This guy was sticking around for 2 weeks. And after a few days, he figured out this guy is not just a relative, he is his son. And the money belongs to him. So one day, the next day, the guy comes in, asks for a donation that day, and he says, "I don't need to give you a donation. You are a fabulously rich person." And he says, "Rabbi, don't play games with me. You see, I'm in tatters. I don't even have a place to sleep." And the rabbi says, "No, actually, you are a multi-millionaire." And the guy says, "What do you mean, Rabbi?" And so he explains to him that, he tells him the story, gets him on a train, sends him to Switzerland, and he had to say, he became a multimillionaire. Rabbi Kreisberg tells the story because he says, in truth, this is the story of a lot of us. In many ways, we are extremely rich spiritually, rich in talents, rich in ability to speak, very rich in many different faculties. The difference is that sometimes we're just not aware of it. This guy was always a rich man, he just didn't know that he was rich. To hammer the point home, I love this story, is from a story, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, says the following: what is the difference between a rich man and a poor man? And he says, pay attention to this. Sometimes a rich man has a lot of money. But you ask him one particular day, and he will tell you, "You know what? I'm in a lot of trouble. I got 5 people who are suing me. The government is after me for back taxes. All my money I have no cash flow right now. It's all tied up in investments. And so that day, they don't ask me for money because I'm just, I just don't have any money to give you." At the same time, you can have a poor man. And a poor man who just happened to strike it rich going to the right synagogue, and he collected $6,000 that particular day. If you ask the poor man, "Are you a rich man?" he would say, "No, I'm a poor man. I just happened to be lucky today, and I got a lot of money in shul." And the rich man would say, "I'm a rich man. It just happens that today I want to get over this. Everything will be good. But right now, I'm in a lot of financial trouble." So the Frierdiker Rebbe said the following. He says, it doesn't make sense. The rich man has $6,000 thrown away in his of cash. You can spend money today, and the poor man, and the rich man, there's no money to spend. So he says, this is the business in life. What is rich and what is poor? It's all in your attitude and how you view yourself. If you see yourself as rich and capable and competent and confident and secure and calm, you're rich in those things. And if you don't view yourself, your attitude towards yourself is, "I am in trouble and I have a lot of issues and everything is going wrong for me," you know what? Your attitude towards yourself, that's what makes the difference between a rich person and a poor person. So a lot of it has to do not with your circumstances. Nothing changed, and you didn't have to have something happen to you. It's the rich man sees himself as rich, and the poor man sees himself as poor. Now that is an interesting lesson. Let me hammer this home just with one more story. So I told the Chappas, there once was a Jewish kid, and the Jewish kid was in a terrible accident, and he lost his right arm. His mother was very upset, and but to give him a sense of self-esteem and confidence, she sent him to a Japanese judo trainer to be able to to wrestle, to do things with one arm. And this guy was good, and he trained him for like a year, 2 years. And then finally, after that time, the judo wrestler said, I want him to go into a tournament. I think he's ready. And the mother says, what are you talking about? He's going to have to wrestle with people with two arms. He's only got one arm. The judo teacher says, no, no, no. He's going to win. He's going to win. He's capable of handling. So they put, against her will and against the kids. Kid wasn't interested either. But the judo teacher got him a wrestling match. The guy comes in. He's got two arms. And of course, the first few minutes, he's got him on the ground. And then again, and it looked like this was like a joke, I mean, it was just like, he was clearly going to win. The arm guy was going to win over the boy. And the judo teacher wouldn't let him get out. And the guy with two arms started getting overconfident. And at one point in time, the kid, the Jewish boy, does a move on him. And in this move, he knocks out his opponent and is declared the winner of the match. The judo teacher tells the boy, he says, what do you think? Why do you think you won? No. The teacher says, I'll tell you why. Says, in judo, there is this one move that if you know how to do it, the only response, the only way to beat your opponent is to grab onto his right arm. You don't have a right arm, so you couldn't grab onto it. What is the lesson of the story? The lesson of the story is sometimes we look at the things that we're lacking, the things that went wrong, the things that happened, the clap on the head that, we didn't think we needed and so forth. And we think like, somehow this is a lack and this is a bad thing. And we don't necessarily grab into the idea that it came from God. You know what? It may be very difficult and it may be very painful. And it may be, and everybody else is telling you it's not a good situation and so forth. But God gave it to you. And sometimes, that's exactly the thing that gives you your success. It sometimes is. I'm not saying it always works out that way so clearly and so forth. But that is part of the inspiration that we can take for this time of year. When we get in touch with the Avinu Malkeinu, the king inside of ourselves, that we have a king and he's in charge and he's running our life. And even when it seems like it's not running the right way, we have an Avinu Malkeinu. He's actually giving us the opportunities to do something with this thing. And sometimes we can take and we can make that situation into a positive event. I'll keep it short this time. And unless you want to hear another story, and I'll send it over to my wife. What do you think?
They're all on mute.
They're all on mute. Okay.
Another story.
Another story.
Another story. You don't hear me?
Yeah, I hear
it's
you.
the first time I got excited about lacking something. I really did. I felt no one could grab onto it.
Yeah. It's not really. It was a great story. I think it was. Okay. I'm not an original storyteller. I steal from other people. That was from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, but I liked it very much. Some of the other stories I have was from Rabbi Friedman. So here's a story. As a girl, her name was Kreitzman. Interesting. The names always work together. And she was a little girl, and she once went up into the Catskills for summer camp. It's a appropriate story for this time of year. Anyway, she was with her grandfather, and she noticed that her grandfather was walking with her, and they passed by an elderly man, and her grandfather sort of gave a nod, like, you do in shul to somebody you recognize distantly. You don't like him. You're not his buddy, so you don't say a big hello or anything. But he gave a nod to him, and the guy gave a nod back. The granddaughter noticed this and said, "Grandfather, who was that man that you just greeted?" And he says, "I don't want to talk about it." So that got her attention. She started asking, no, tell me. And she kept bothering him until finally he says, "Okay, I'll tell you." He says, "That was my best friend before the war, before World War II. She says, "Was your best friend? And this is the way you greet him? You didn't say hello or anything? You just nodded to him?" He says, yeah, because of a very painful thing. He was my best friend. we were chavrusas. We spent a tremendous amount of time together. We talked about everything. He knew everything about me. I knew everything about him, and we were very close before the war. And then the war came, and I was in. He was in. I believe he was in Romania, and that initially that when the Nazis weren't there, but things started looking very bad. So the grandfather he started to he came up with a plan. He used a lot of money and he got passports and certificates for himself, for his wife, and for his children, so that they should be able to get out in case the situation turned very bad. And he hid them somewhere in upstairs in a room in an attic or something like that. Anyway, things did get bad. The Nazis came in, and his best friend came over to him and said, "You know, Moishe, whatever his name was, says, tell me, what are you doing? You know, the situation is terrible here. Do you have a plan of how to take care of yourself?" So he's his best friend. So he told him, he said, "Yeah, I have the document." He even told him the box where he kept the documents in. That night, the grandfather went, no, he's not a grandfather, but then he went up to the room where he had kept the documents and it was empty. So he ran over to his best friend to find out what happened. His best friend was gone and his family was gone. They had disappeared. The Nazis came. They took him. They took him. And he took his wife. They took his kids. Never saw them again. And after the war, he was able to live, and he found out that his best friend had also survived the war. Basically, found out those stolen documents. So the granddaughter says to the grandfather, he says, "Grandfather, why didn't you spit in his face?" And he's an evil man. Why did you nod to him? And the grandfather said, "You don't understand. What is that going to accomplish? It's after the war. You don't understand what panic people were in during that period of time." It says, I can't, he can't per se forgive him, but he doesn't see any reason to like hold a grudge against him, because what does it mean? It just means I keep holding a grudge. It's a very interesting way to look at, this whole idea of forgiveness and asking forgiveness of other people and asking forgiveness about oneself and forgiveness from Hashem and forgiveness of everything else. You have to look at it and say, you know what? Some things are hard, some things are difficult, and I don't know that very few people who could live on that particular level of how this guy does. But he is teaching you an important lesson, and that is, what is the point of holding grudges and worrying or other kinds of stuff? What is it going to accomplish afterwards? It doesn't accomplish anything. So whatever happened, there was another partner in the whole situation. There was God in the situation, and ultimately, although it can be very hard to say, and this is somehow God wanted this certain event to happen, and it wouldn't have happened if He didn't want it to happen that in the end. And so there are difficult things in life, and there are painful things in life, and there are awful things that happen in life. But this guy was a happy guy, and he was happy, and he had children and he had grandchildren, and he enjoyed his life because he didn't sit dwellingly on thinking about the negative things that had happened to him prior to the Holocaust. So yeah, he probably never forgave this guy. That's why he only nodded at him. But on the other hand, he didn't, it didn't consume him. And I think that's another lesson in the whole idea of Yom Kippur and forgiveness and forgiving. We forgive Hashem for the difficult things that happened in the last year, and He forgives us. He forgives us for a lot of difficult things that we gave Him, and we get back together again. And that's part of I think, the lesson. Maybe not the thrilling, happy lesson, but I think it's also a deep lesson and an important lesson for this time of year. With that, I'll turn the microphone over to my wife. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. So does anybody want to say anything before I begin? Okay, I'll begin. So I'm going to keep it short tonight, and I'm going to tell you a story. And first, I'm going to say the four things that I always begin with, which is that number one, we're in a remarkable time. And how do I know that? Because Lubavitch Rebbe told us, he told CNN, he told everybody that 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 we're in the beginning of the unfolding of the redemption, and and uh, and it's happening, whether we believe it or not. And the Rebbe was never wrong about any of his predictions, and this also. So, the second thing I want to say is that our souls were handpicked to be at this time, at this juncture in time. We were given all the tools we need, all the Torah, which is our guidebook, and the mitzvahs, which are our power tools to accomplish whatever we need to accomplish. And finally, what we're doing tonight, learning about the redemption, is the most powerful way to speed it up. That's what the Rebbe told us. So the title of today's class was Gratitude Pays the Highest Interest. Oh, I had different titles in I don't know what emails. I sent out different titles in different emails, but essentially the same point. That gratitude, Hashem pays back for gratitude almost quicker than for anything else. Now, there's a logical reason why that's true. Why is gratitude so favored by Hashem? Why is the understanding that there is only one God and everything he does is good and I can thank him for everything? Why is that more powerful than other things? Anybody have a guess? I'll tell you something that I heard. And that is, those are the commandments that we heard directly from Hashem. We heard from Hashem, I am your God. I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. I am your God, and don't have any fake gods. That's the second commandment. Don't have any other gods with me. I am it. And so when we recognize that Hashem is it, he is the author of everything, and he is our God, meaning that everything he does is with exquisite love for us, then we're fulfilling the two commandments that we heard directly from Hashem on Har Sinai, as opposed to the rest of the 613 commandments, which we heard from Moshe. Um, so um, so anyway, I want to I'm going to reiterate. I'm just going to close the door. I'm going to I'm going to quickly retell a story that I told 2 weeks ago. Very quickly retell it because it has a sequel. So this was a story about gratitude. This was a story. If you remember, I told the story about Rabbi Meir Shapiro, who was the rabbi who started Daf Yomi, the practice to learn a two sides of a page of Gemara every day. Anyway, that was what he was famous about. But he would go around to different yeshivas before the war, and he would test the boys, and he would encourage them. He would go to different schools, and one time he went to one cheder, one school, and after he tested the boys, he said, "I'm so sorry, I don't have any sweets, which is what I usually hand out after I've tested the boys. But I'm going to give you the sweetest gift of all." And if you remember the story, he said, he told them why. He asked them a question: why? What letter does not appear in the blessing after meals? What Hebrew letter does not appear there? And they couldn't guess. And he told them it's Fe Sophis, Fe Sophit, final Fe. And he explained, because Hashem says, for the person who says all the every word of the benching, which is quite long for people who do it, people who know about it, anybody who says every single word with intention, meaning you know what you're saying and you mean what you're saying, then for him there will be no shetzef, no ketzef, and no charon af. All those things end in a Fe Sophit, and they all mean Hashem's anger. Hashem will not show you his anger. He will not show you his, not anger, let's say his blistering anger, his very, very, very big anger. He will not show it to you. And you will get your parnasa in bounty and in an honorable way. So he said,
Can I interrupt? Can you repeat those four names, ways of anger?
Ketsef, it's Shin, Sadi, Fe Sofit. Ketsef, Hoof, Sadi, Fe Sofit.
Right.
Aron off. Yeah, a lot of them mean like, like they mean anger, Hashem's anger. And he says,
Thank you.
a person who benches with this kind of attention to every word and meaning every word with his heart in it will not experience those three experience those three things. So the kids all thought it was very interesting, but only one kid took it seriously. And from that day on, he said every word of the blessing with total intention. And to the extent that he missed recess every single day because it took him so long to do it with intention on every word. And okay, fast forward, as I said a couple weeks ago, fast forward, it's World War II. He is standing in a concentration camp. He's been rounded up, and probably Auschwitz. And he stood and in the line where they would, when you got to the head of the line, they would decide if you go to the left, it's instant death, it's instant gassing. They send you straight to the gas chambers. If the elderly and the little kids, that's where they went. And the ones on the right were like men or strong women who they felt could do something for them, could be put into a workforce. And he was like in a, in between a kid and a man. And so he stood up as tall as he could get, and he got closer and closer to the guy, to Mengele or whoever it was, and Yimach Shmo, and may his name be obliterated, and Mengele. So and when he got there, as he stood in line, he said, "Ribono Shalom, Master of the world. For years now, I've been saying every word of the blessing after meals with total intention, my mind on it, my heart on it. Please, Hashem, you promised. Let me not be subject to Shetzef, Ketzef, or Haron Af. Please, Hashem." And he got there, and the guy who was making the selection said, "To the right, to the workforce." Then, when he was standing in the line for the workforce, he again said, "Hashem, I don't." They were asking people what their professions were, how they could help. The Germans, how could they help? In a labor camp, what can you do? And he was a yeshiva bacher. He was a yeshiva student, and he knew nothing. He had no skills other than learning Torah. And so he said, "Ribono Shalom, you said that if I've been saying the blessing with kavana all the time. Please save me from Shetzef, Ketzef, and Charonov." Shortly after that, a guy behind him leans over and whispers in his ear, "Say you are a chef and that I'm your assistant. You're a master chef and I'm your assistant." So he figures, I don't have anything to lose. He says he's a chef, and the guy behind him says, "I'm his assistant." And they make it in, and they get assigned to the kitchen, which means that he is able to survive. He can sneak as much mazonos, as much bread or whatever. He can sneak as much as he needs, and to the extent that he didn't become skinny, and he didn't lose the color in his cheeks. Okay, these are the happy days, but then his luck turns, and a Nazi comes into the kitchen, and he sees this anomaly. What is this? A Jewish kid who looks like he's in good shape. What's going on? How come he didn't go straight to the gas chambers in the first place? And he said, "You come with me." And he took him out. He said, "What do you think? You think you have this cushy job? Come with me." He took him outside. The ground was frozen. He said, "The Allies are bombing us, and we need a bunker where all the officers can jump in. And he gave him a tiny little hammer, and he said, "Dig." And he said, he said, "Dig a bunker 6 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet." And he left him, and he said, "And if you can't do it, you're not going back to the kitchen, never again. And so when I come back out, it better be dug." And anyway, so the guy was desperate. He tried to hammer the ground with the frozen ground with this tiny hammer. Of course, nothing happened. Anyway, some Germans saw him and started laughing. They went by in a truck, and they started throwing things at him. They threw cigarette butts, they threw bottles, and finally they threw everything on the truck. They threw cucumbers, tomatoes, whatever they had, squash, whatever they had, they threw at him. And he realized after they left, I'm surrounded by food. I'm in a place where people are dying of starvation. I'm surrounded by food. Well, what good is it for me? I have to dig this thing. Then another truck came by of Poles, and the Polish people said, food. Oh my gosh. And they thought that this guy was in charge of the food. And they said, what? Give us that food. What can we do? Give us that food. We want that food. And he said, so the young man straightened up and he said, fine, dig me a ditch 6 by 6 by 6. And that's exactly what they did. They hopped off, they dug the ditch. And the guy had said his formula, please Hashem, save me. I benched and I didn't, and save me from Shetzaf, Ketzaf, and Charonov. Anyway, he survived the war. And now here's the sequel. The sequel is, I heard that story 3 or 4 weeks ago on Shabbos. And I heard it 3 or 4 weeks ago on Shabbos. And I wish Dina had stayed on for the sequel. So I heard that story 3 or 4 weeks ago on Shabbos, and I tried saying parts of the benching. Usually, I could get the first paragraph out with intention, and then whoosh, my mind would float off onto whatever distracted thoughts I had. Because when you have not been benching every word with intention, the first time you try and get back on track, it's very, very, very hard. And it took me quite a while, but I made sure that every single word I said with intention. And that was this Tuesday. And something inspired me. I don't know what it was. I just had this thesaurus, this inspiration, this thing from above that made me all of a sudden say, what are you doing, Shlomis Yehudis? You heard that story 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. How come you're not doing it? And so I made sure, oh good, she's on again. So I made sure on Tuesday, and I sat down there. I think it took me an age to say the benching every single word with intention. And it was an interesting thing. Anyway, I also, well, no, I'm going to skip that part of the story. I'm just going to go to the gratitude part. Anyway, so what happened later in that day? I had heard about a bicycle that somebody was selling, and I thought maybe that would be a good bicycle for me. So I went over to the person's house. They told me they're not home, but the bicycle is in the garage and I should just take it out and look at it. And that's what I did. I took it out and looked at it. And it was a cute, cute bicycle. And I just got on it, not to ride it. I wasn't dressed for riding, and I wasn't wearing a helmet or anything like that. I just got on the bike just to see how it felt, if it felt like a good fit. The next second, I don't know how it happened. I fell straight over to the side, and my head smashed into the driveway, smashed into the blacktop of the driveway with an incredible smashing sound. It was like, I mean, that sound was, it was an impressive sound. And I laid there and I was, whoa. I laid there and I went to touch my head because my head had had such a horrible bang. And I realized, oh my gosh, it knocked my sheitel off. And I craned my head around and I saw my sheitel's 4 feet away. My wig is 4 feet away on the ground. And this is not about gratitude. This is just an interesting thing about what a Jewish woman is. After Orthodox Jewish women, many Orthodox Jewish women cover their hair. Some of them cover it 24/7, and it becomes so much a part of you that your head is covered. It's a spiritual thing. It's not a logical thing. It's from the Torah. It's a married woman covers her hair, and I saw my head is not covered. I knew that I just taken like a critical fall. I bet I fell on my head on pavement. Like I fell on my head, and I didn't care a whit about my health, I immediately scrambled, like I like I don't know, like I swam over to get my wig and plop it on my head. And then I tried to figure out how I'm doing. It's just an interesting thing about what a Jewish woman is and how deeply Torah is ingrained into her being. So anyway, I gathered my wits around me, and I realized that I could get up, and I actually put the bike away, and I got in my car, and I thought, okay, my head hurts, my neck hurts, but I don't see things with double vision. Pretty good. I'm not seeing things with double vision. I went home and, and thank God I have a nurse who is a neighbor, a close neighbor. And I went over to her and I told her the whole story. And I said, since I'm not seeing double, for sure I can just sleep through the night and see in the morning what the damage was, right? And she said, oh no, no. When you have a severe, when you fall on your head, and especially you fall on your head on pavement, you have to go to you don't even go to urgent care. You have to go to the ER. They're going to give you like an MRI or something because God forbid a person could have bleeding of the brain. Even if you don't see double, you could have bleeding in your brain, and that is super serious, and you have to take this seriously. You have to go to the ER right away. So anyway, I went to the ER right away, and Heskel Shimon joined me, and in the ER, Hashem was kind to me in many ways in the ER. And
6174695.
he was kind. Sorry, he was kind to me in many ways in the ER. But I have to tell you, right before I had my CAT scan, I said, Hashem, today I benched with intention on every single word. Every single word, Hashem. Please, you promise that if a person benches with every single word, then you'll save them from Shetzef, Ketzef, and Haronoff. Please, Hashem. And I went through the CAT scan. And then they did something else I can't even remember. And I said, Hashem, remember, you said if a person, today I benched the whole thing with Kavana. You said that if a person benches the whole thing with Kavana, you'll save them from Shetzef, Ketzef, and Haronoff. And whatever that other test was, I went through it. And then we were there till 1:30 in the morning, and they delivered the good news that there was no, I had, they x-rayed me from my neck up because it was my head and my neck that really hurt. And they said there's nothing broken and there's no brain bleeding. So anyway, gratitude not only works, when something bad happens to us and we express our thank you, Hashem, this is from you. It's not from anybody else. And if it's from you, then it's good. And if you want it, I want it. And it not only works after the fact to restore your sanity, it's also a prophylactic measure that saves you from disaster. Now, I'm not saying like the guy in the Holocaust story, he still had to go through the Holocaust in a Nazi concentration camp. I'm sure it wasn't easy. It's not like Hashem spared him from everything, but he was spared from horrible stuff. He was spared from the horrible stuff. And me too. I have some ramifications from my fall. It was a big fall. But Hashem saved me from, I realized afterwards, what I fell on my head. I believe I fell on my head only. I did not even have a black and blue mark anywhere on my body. Nothing, only my head. A little swell, whatever. And can you imagine falling with all your weight on the top of your head on pavement? And anyway, so a person, God forbid, could have been a paraplegic after that. A person could have broken their neck. A person could have, all these different things could have happened. So anyway, it's so interesting how Hashem worked. He gave me the inspiration. Hashem is such a good father. He gave me the inspiration before because he wanted to give me the credit. He wanted to give me the the collateral, the funds in order to show Hashem, look, Hashem, I have this in the bank. Please do what you promised for me. So anyway, next week I'm going to tell a story about also a dramatic story from my life about gratitude after the fact, after something totally inexplicable has happened to you, something that blows your brains, why we still have to have gratitude. So anyway, I'm going to wish everybody a good night, and I'm going to end the recording, and I'll take any questions.